Will Vanderhart, and this is the Good Leader Podcast. It's great to have you with us today, especially as today we have got Carey Nieuwhof here. If you don't know who Carey is, well, you're behind the curve because you need to get into his podcast, which has a huge global reach, and he's a hugely celebrated author, speaker, but he's also been a church planter and regenerator. And Carey, I want to welcome you to the podcast today. Welcome. It's great to have you here.
Oh, thank you. It's really, really good to be here.
Now, Carey, we really got into the weeds yesterday. I mean, you spoke for several hours. I think people could have listened to you for like several more hours, and they were kind of hanging on every word because you were offering them a message around the kind of transformed inner life. How do we do ministry well? And there's obviously some mechanistic things that you brought to the table, and also some deep character things, and also some spiritual things. And I just wonder briefly today, could we start off with a bit of advice you'd give to church planters who are trying to get a good order or cadence in their life and ministry? What sort of tips would you give them?
So for order or cadence in their life and ministry, I would start with your character, because I think ultimately your character, not your competency, determines your capacity and also your longevity. Like you think about all the leaders that we know who have made headlines because of moral failures, etc. Often they were super smart, super bright. And the reason they're not in leadership at 45, 50, 70 years old is not because of a lack of competency, it's a lack of character. Second thing I'd say is leadership in and of itself draws people who are drawn to competency. It's like, yep, I'm gonna go to a conference, gonna read the book, gonna listen to a podcast, I'm gonna go to a seminar. And so I naturally work on my competency. I do not naturally work on my character. And my character is probably the thing that's going to sink me. Like, if you gain the whole world and you lose your soul, as Jesus said, that's where you really end up in trouble. So work twice as hard on your character as you do on your competency. Don't give up on your competency. Work hard, listen to those podcasts, read those books, go to the conferences, get better, sharpen your saw. But, your character, for me, it starts in the morning with Jesus. It starts with, I've read through the Bible in a year for over 25 years, and I just do that, not because I'm strong, but because I'm weak, and otherwise I wouldn't read through it, or I would cheat and like I'm preaching on Acts, so I'm going to read Acts, right? That kind of thing. So try to do that. One of the disciplines I have is I try to have a devotional life that has nothing to do with work. I pray about work. But I'm like, if all of this ministry goes away tomorrow, what is left of my faith? Yeah. What gets stripped away? So it starts in the morning. It also means doing the deep work of counseling. And I resisted that for about 8 years when I started out in ministry. And our marriage got to the point where my wife, Tony, who's here with us in this podcast recording, was like, you have to go or I don't know how this is going to work out. And it was such a huge swallow of pride for me because I thought I send people to counseling. Yeah. I don't go to counseling. Yeah. And so it was opening up and realizing, oh, it's not just the world. There's stuff in me that God wants to deal with. And that honestly has been like a 20 plus year process of counseling and redemption and sanctification and thinking I have it figured out and learning I don't. So, and then the third thing I would say, or fourth, I forget what number we're on, is deep friendships. Okay. People are lonely, leaders are lonely, and leadership is inherently lonely. Yeah. I mean, people have been writing about that for decades. It's isolating, but we're also in a loneliness epidemic, and a lot of people do not have close friends. And if you can, and it's hard, like when you're in church ministry, it's the perfect storm because for the first time in my life, when I left law to go into ministry, what I did was who I am, and who I am is what I did. And the people I serve were also my friends in my community. It's inherently confusing. So it's finding those trusted friendships where you can go deep and be yourself. And I think you can go 90% of the way with people in your church, and you should, but you need to have a couple of people outside your church, maybe colleagues that you can really confide in and tell them the 100%. And a lot of leaders don't have that.
Carey, that's amazing. I mean, we could just pocket that and that would be so helpful. I completely resonate. I mean, I've spent years in therapy. I continue to get supervision, and I know how important that is. But many of the young leaders I work with, they tell me they're just too busy to either reflect on themselves, they're too busy to do that deep work, they're too busy to really invest in the scriptures for their own sake. And I sense there's obviously an epidemic of busyness. There's also a lot of external pressures for younger leaders. But they're missing something, aren't they? And I was really interested in your calendar that you expressed, and the way in which you also identified the energy that you have at different times of day. And I wonder if you just say a little bit about that.
So I had a crash in leadership 18 years ago, and it ground my life to a halt. And it took me years to reconstruct it. And what I realized is I was a pedal to the metal guy. I was like always on, only had one speed. It was high gear, and it led me to crash and burn out. So I'm like, okay, can't do this anymore. So what do I have to do? So over a period of years, I'm going to give you the like 2-minute version, but this took years to figure out, develop, refine. I realized I was pretty good at time management when I burned out, but time management makes you efficient, but not necessarily more effective. And the problem is when the incoming keeps increasing, you have more people. I was talking about this at dinner last night with friends, like, talk to any CEO and they'll tell you growth is a wonderful thing and it's a terrible thing. And we were at 30% sustained growth year after year for over 5 years. That's not sustainable. And my formula was more people equals more hours, and it doesn't scale, and it led to a crash. So I'm like, okay, what do I have to do? So I stopped just managing time and started paying attention to my energy. And I think everybody watching this or listening to this knows, you're a morning person, you're a night owl. And all of us kind of know that about ourselves, right? Like, how about you?
I'm a morning person.
You're a morning person. Yeah. You pull a room of leaders. Most people are morning people, but you got a few night owls here. And what we know in that is you and I are better in the morning than we are at night. So if you're trying to write a sermon, if you're trying to do some stuff that requires deep work, the morning is going to be more productive space than the evening. So I knew I was a morning person, but I never thought about managing my energy. So here's a challenge. Divide your day into 3 zones: green, yellow, red. Green is when your energy is the highest. That's like your brain is clear, you feel alive, you're in a good mood. Yeah. If you're writing a message, it's going to come easier and better than when you're not at your best. So that's your green zone. Your red zone is the opposite. That's usually 2 hours in the day. And for a lot of leaders, it happens either after lunch or before dinner. Yeah. So for me, it's 4 to 6. For a lot of people, it's 2 to 3 or 1 to 2 or something, where you just come back and you're like, oh my gosh, I need a nap. I need a flat white. I need a jolt. I need an energy drink. I need something to keep me going. And that's just, again, reality. You're human. You're not a robot. So that's your red zone. For me, that's 4 to 6. Yellow is everything that isn't green or red. And you're moderately productive. You're reasonably good, but you're maybe not at your best, but you're not at your worst. So green, yellow, red, literally take a 12-hour clock, plot out those zones. And then here's the secret: do what you're best at when you're at your best. So I thought I was great at everything when I was a young leader. Now I realize I have no skills. I'm basically a communicator, a thinker, a writer. That's all I do. I'm not a project manager. I'm not a sustainer. There's so many things I'm bad at. And yet when you look at what you're really best at as a leader, what really turns the needle for you. For some people, it's Excel spreadsheets. That's not me. For some people, it's project management. That's not me. For me, it's communication. And as a pastor, when I'm communicating well, when the vision is clear, when the team is aligned, and we have the resources we need for ministry, everything goes better. So what I did on the other side of burnout was I started doing all of those things in my green zone when I was at my best. I cut out breakfast meetings. I said, okay, 7 to 11 a.m., I'm going hard on the stuff that matters most. And 2 things happen. Number 1, you get your stuff done. So there's no more Saturday special sermons because you did them Monday during your green zone, and Tuesday you finished up during your green zone. And I don't know about you, but when my sermon's done, I don't have to worry. This talk I gave at the Alpha Conference, that was done. This is May. It was done in February. Yeah. I didn't worry about the talk because it was done, man. I wasn't sitting on the plane going, now what am I going to say? Now what am I going to say? I got to tell the Alpha, so much is last minute in ministry, and that's what kills your family time. That's what, even if you don't have anything on Saturday, you're then writing your sermon. So get your most important stuff and the stuff that you're best at done in your green zone, the rest will take care of itself. And then in your red zone, don't fight it. Take a nap, go for a walk. Otherwise you're going to stare at a blinking cursor, getting diminishing rewards, and it's amazing what you can get done. So I thought this was idiosyncratic. We trained probably at this point over 100,000 leaders in the system, and what I've discovered is it works for a lot of people. Yeah.
So helpful. I mean, I did a talk on befriending your creative mind. I'm really interested in kind of neuroplasticity and creativity. And what was really fascinating was plotting the lives of lots and lots of creative leaders, poets, artists. They all had this incredible energy and creativity at the very start of the day or the very end of the day. But in the middle of the day, their brain was very rational, linear. That's the time to go to the bank and pay your bills, but it wasn't the time to be creative. So you looked at, great poets, Ted Hughes and friends, or looked at Beethoven or Proust, and they were all working with a coffee-based ritual super early in the morning, and that's where they did their best work. So I found it really interesting.
Question about that. This is interesting. So I had not the kind of research you did, but I ran across a really interesting article last year that talked about the creative space of some of the greatest minds, authors, musicians, etc. Not only did they work in that green zone, they didn't call it that, but we can call it that. They worked in their green zone, but they only worked a few hours a day. Did you find that too? Like they were working, let's say till 11 a.m. and then they'd do a 4-hour walk through the gardens, or they'd play with the dog or do something else. And I called my last book At Your Best, where I write about this stuff. I almost called it the 3-hour workday. Okay. Because if you actually use that green zone really well to get your important work done, you're kind of done.
I'm a really passionate fisherman, and Hemingway, who's a great love of mine, great writer and great fisherman, he used to work in front of his bedroom window super early in the morning. He did about 3 hours of work and spent the rest of the day fishing largely. So,
Yes.
The kind of commonality in these creatives was that they kind of identified, and they weren't embarrassed about the fact that they were really green in the zone at that time and for that length of time. And I do think the sort of workhorse mentality for leadership means that we disconnect so much with what God's actually bringing to us, the moment of revelation and the great talk. So thank you. That's so wise. That's so helpful. You said something really important, I thought, yesterday, which was, we talked about burnout. I had a burnout breakdown. You talked about yours. It took me years to recover. It took you years to recover. Lots of our younger leaders, they're experiencing a different sort of burnout, which you described yesterday as this kind of long, kind of, I can keep going, unhappy disconnection from joy. Could you just say a bit about that? Because I think a lot of people in the room I noticed were like nodding and going, oh my goodness, I'm still doing my thing, but I'm just not enjoying my thing anymore. And I thought that was so powerful.
So let me just start with a disclaimer. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I do not have training in this. This is observational. But burnout, if you really burn out, like you burned out, unfortunately, I burned out, you're like, I'm roadkill, I'm done. So long story short, here's low-grade burnout. The functions of life continue, but the joy of life is gone. And what that means is your heart is kind of numb, your mood is flat, you're going through the motions, you're preaching the message, you're picking the kids up after school, but you don't feel anything anymore, you're just kind of flat. And the problem is you can go on that way for years. It's not the life that God promised us. It's a sign that you're not as healthy as you could be. And so if that's the case, it's not going to stop you to make you get better, like full grade burnout is, like when you're kind of in the ditch. And that's a danger of it. It's like having the slow moving cancer that you're unaware of. That's going to kill you 15 years from now, but not today. So if that's a leader, it's probably some time to go see a counselor, get some help, access some resources, and reprogram, because you don't have to live that way.
Carey, that's really helpful. We're going to come to close. These are quite short podcasts, so I'd love to spend more time, because I just think this is so gold for our people. But just a word of encouragement for young leaders. They're feeling a lot of stress and strain. The context is challenging. They're really doing amazing work, but they need to know how this can be a lifelong calling, not just a 7-year sprint till they kind of run out of steam. And I just wonder, what could you say to help them to keep going in the ministry and to create healthy practices to do that?
I think the challenge and the promise is to figure out how to live in a way today that will help you thrive tomorrow. living away today. What do you have to do today, spiritually, emotionally, physically, financially? And there's one other category, relationally. That's it. 5 categories I think through. What do you have to do today in those categories to help you thrive tomorrow? So I'll give you a really quick study. I taught yesterday, a 5-hour time difference from where I am at home. We came in a couple days early. We had some really downtime with family and friends. Yesterday I taught, I made sure I was well rested. I ate properly. My talk was almost in my red zone. It was in my yellow and red, not my green, but I knew that. And so I planned ahead. The content was written months in advance. I was ready to go. And afterwards I celebrated with friends. And it was a great day because we planned ahead and I knew what I would feel. You have to get to the point, almost like an athlete. I'm definitely not an athlete, but like an athlete sort of knows their body. It's like, this is what I should feel like in the race at this moment. You want to know yourself well enough to know I'm naturally going to be tired in the afternoon. I need to go in with a full tank. So I did that. And then we had a celebration dinner with friends. And then, it was just great. And so I knew that could have been a very grueling, exhausting day where I ran in on fumes. I ran in with a full tank. And then today is a recovery day. We're going to have fun. We're going to go to leadership conference. We're doing this podcast. We have some dinners and lunches and that kind of thing set up, but it's going to be a recovery day. Tomorrow's a fun day. And then we fly home and then I'm back at it again. Right. Well, I'm living in a way today that will help me thrive tomorrow. And that's way more accessible to every leader than I realized it was in my 30s.
Wow. Carey Nieuwhof, everyone. That's real wisdom for you, and I hope you found that really engaging and helpful. And I love you to connect with Carey's podcast. You can check that out on all of your podcast providers. So much here to think about. I just want you to take away that one point. How can you live today so you can live well tomorrow? What's it look like to live really well today so that tomorrow is going to take care of itself? And how can we get into that mentality of planning our rest time and planning our work time, and being really considerate about the cadence of when is a good time for us to extend ourselves and when is a good time to pull back and rest and relax. So I hope that's blessed you as much as it's blessed me. Have a really great day, and we'll see you really soon.